Good evening. We're at the Craig Allachie Hotel in the centre of Speyside, and I'm with Anne Miller. Anne, would you like to introduce yourself and say what you do?
Yes, I'm International Brand Ambassador with Chivas Brothers, the whisky and gin company which belongs to Pernod Ricard Group. And my job is to talk about Scotch whisky to people from all over the world who come to visit Scotland, and from time to time to visit many different countries of the world in order to talk about whisky and share the experience of enjoying whisky with them.
Speyside is a region on the east of Scotland between Aberdeen and Inverness around the River Spey, and a high proportion of Scotland's distilleries are in this region. What does being a Speyside whisky mean? Well,
it means lots of different things, in fact, because there are over 50 different whiskies in this region. Half of the distilleries in Scotland are concentrated here in this small area, relatively small area. But if you wanted to say what brings them together, I think you'd be talking about a lovely honey sweetness, a rich fruitiness, and an intensity of flavour, which set them apart from whiskies from the lowlands, the spiciness perhaps of some of the Highland whiskies. And the thing that they probably don't share with Islay whiskies is that very few of them are smoky or have any smoke at all. So it's a very accessible taste, and that shows if you look at the top 10 rankings of single malt whiskies from Scotland, because pretty much all the whiskies in the top 10 have been distilled here in Speyside. Glenfiddich, #1 in the States, Abelard #1 in France, Glengrant #1 in Italy, Cardu #1 in Spain, Glenfiddich, of course, which is the #1 around the world, and so it goes on. So these whiskies are a flavour which is enjoyed by single malt connoisseurs, and they are also obviously very much in use by blenders to make premium blended whiskies, which people enjoy all over the world.
Good. Could you just tell us a little bit about your principal distilleries in this region?
Well, our most important distillery in this region is the Glenfiddich, the single malt that started it all, established way back in 1824. So this is one of the most important single malt whiskies in the world, enjoyed all around the world, significantly #1 in the United States and North America. And a range which goes from 12 years, 15, 18, 21, 25, with cask strength Nadura in various different incarnations and quite a few different special editions which are available from time to time. So a really lovely, classic, elegant, very rewarding whisky, which is one that you come back to and realise just how much you missed it.
From the other distilleries, you've got several great distilleries in the
Yes.
region. Do you have favourites that you particularly like?
It's always terribly difficult to choose a favourite whisky, but there'll always be an Abelard in my box of favourites. This is a beautifully rich, balanced whisky which works just as well in bourbon casks as in sherry casks. And perhaps the 18-year-old is one that I would choose on this occasion as being one that's got a beautiful balance of richness and fruitiness. Of course, the other one that we have, which is a gem in the Speyside coronet or crown, if you like, is really fantastic, is Longbourn. And the 16-year-old, I think, is a superb example of what a Speyside single malt can taste like, rated by all the connoisseurs in the industry. It's really fantastic. It's bottled at a high strength, so it really brings out the best in the dram. Over and above that, we've got quite a few more. Strathisla single malt, which is at the heart of Chivas Regal, Tormore, and a number of other smaller single malts.
One more question. I think it's right that we don't talk a lot, perhaps as much as we should, that 93%, whatever it is, of whisky sales, Scotch whisky sales, of blended whiskies. How important are blended whiskies, and how important are the distilleries in this region? You're called Chivas Brothers for a reason. So can we just talk a little bit about your blends and their link to this region?
We have a number of very important blended Scotch whiskies. Chivas Regal is probably is definitely the flagship amongst these, and Chivas Regal has its roots in Speyside. At its heart is Strathyla single malt whisky, but a very large percentage of the whisky that goes into each bottle will have been distilled in the various distilleries within the Speyside region. So that is really very much the Speyside style of blending whisky, which is appropriate because, after all, Chivas Brothers began in Aberdeen, only a few miles away from Speyside, and it was easy for the two brothers, James and John, to get hold of the right single malts that they needed to make their blends. Our other main blended Scotch whisky is Ballantine's. This is the number 2 blended Scotch whisky, the number 2 Scotch whisky, in fact, in the entire world, enjoyed all over the world, and goes from finest to 12 to 17, 21 and 30 and beyond. And this whisky too has its roots in Speyside, in that there are 2 single malt whiskies which are really at its heart, Glenfiddich and Milton Duff, which bring together lovely fruity and floral vanilla flavours to the blend. But that whisky has a little bit more of a balance from the whole of Scotland in the single glass, and there are whiskies from other regions as well as Speyside in that blend. And then beyond that, we move into older whiskies. Royal Salute, which actually begins at 21 years old, where a lot of other whiskies leave off, and once more has Strathyla single malt at its heart, but high percentages of other whiskies like Longmorn and other Speyside whiskies coming into that to give it a really powerful, intense flavour, which is nonetheless beautifully balanced with lovely fruity floral flavours as well.